Welcome to the Banega Swasth India podcast. Our focus this season is One Health, One Planet, One Future. Our aim is health for all and leaving no one behind because only a Swasth Bharat can be a Sampann Bharat. I'm Ambika Singh Kama, and today we will be talking to Pradnya Pethankar, SDG Manager at UN World Food Programme. We know there's a link between climate change and sustainable development. Can you just tell that in brief for us?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ambika. I think this is a really opportune time for discussion on specifically the impacts of climate change on sustainable development, and specifically the sustainable goals which are agreed by multiple countries, or rather all countries across the world. However, I like to really bring your attention to SDG 2, which actually aims at achieving a hunger-free world, and it covers all aspects of food and nutrition security. And as you know that climate change is already affecting all the four dimensions of food security, which are physical availability of food, its economic and physical accessibility, its use, which is consumption, and the stability of all these three dimensions over a period of time. And as you know that its implications, they extend across all determinants of malnutrition. Moreover, the world hunger is on the rise, as indicated by recent global statistics. As you know, the climate crisis, conflicts, and pandemic are the major drivers. But as you know that specifically the progress on the SDG 2 has been extremely slow. There is interconnectedness between various SDGs. And specifically, if we talk about SDG 2, I'll say that it is determinant on a lots of factors like the education, the health and well-being, or even the gender issues, the foods wastage and losses, and most importantly, I would say climate change. So I would say that climate change actually impacts SDG too much, to a greater extent, and that's why the achievement of SDG 2 is quite contingent to the climate change and its impacts.
So you did speak about hunger, right? I mean, India doesn't fare, we know it fares really poor actually when we talk about the hunger status. And India is among the countries which is likely to bear the worst of, the warming effect. How is food production affected by climate change?
Right. So if we talk about the food production, the first and foremost, it is like, whenever we talk about the food production, it is the most important part is the agriculture sector. So when we talk about the agriculture sector, it is actually determined by many factors. As there is a climate change, we talk about the temperature rise, the global warming. The global warming actually affects the precipitation, the rainfall patterns, the changes in the rainfall patterns, the moisture, humidity, and all. They all have impact on the production, on the agriculture. There are actually the patterns which are changing. So there are floods in the areas where there were no floods. There are more intense floods. These actions are becoming more, the extreme events are becoming more frequent and more intense. Heat waves are actually really becoming again recurrent. All these factors, they definitely have impact on overall agriculture production. When we look at the long-term scenario. So definitely have that kind of impact on agriculture production.
Okay, so we have a lot of questions coming in from our viewers. First question I would like to take is Parvinder Singh. He's asking, food systems are impacted by and in turn impact climate change. How do we address this twin challenge?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because as we know that while we talked about the production, the production getting affected by the climate change. However, it's quite an interesting phenomena that food systems actually give rise to the greenhouse gas and other elements contributing to about 20 to 30% of global GHG emission. And of this, 50% is actually contributed by agriculture. So agriculture sectors are the first to be affected by climate change, and resulting economic and social consequences, they are particularly visible among the poorest households, the majority of which actually depends on the agriculture activities. And as you know that a huge number of population is depend, specifically if we talk about India, a large proportion of population is dependent on agriculture. Okay. So at the same time, the agriculture sector themselves contribute to climate change and thus are a part of solution by reducing greenhouse gas emission. And for that, I can just say that 2-3 points are extremely important, which is producers to be at the heart of the solution. So the solutions must be producer centric, and their access and training and guidance and investments, they must be facilitated. And most importantly, actually looking at the crops and the crops modification or alternative cropping, alternative livelihoods, reducing the pressure on agriculture are some of the important strategies which need to be taken into consideration.
Okay, so that I hope, Arvinder, that answers your question. Angela is asking, Angela S. Nath wants to know, how big a challenge is food wastage for climate change and hunger? What can we do at an individual level?
That's a fantastic question, and I would say an issue which is really very close to my heart. So when we are actually really talking about the food wastage and hunger, I mean, you know that this is actually an opportunity to really highlight that paradox of hunger and food wastage, which is coexisting. And the problem indeed is very huge. And the question is how we actually can really make this around 1.3 billion ton of food lost through losses and wastages to the about 1.6 billion people across the globe who really need it. And so how we can really achieve the equitable distribution, leaving no one behind, is the real question. And at individual level, a lot actually can be really done, starting right from bringing the discipline, from feeding to cooking practices. We waste quite a lot of material. I mean, if you just say about the vegetables, a lot of things are really thrown out. Household level storage practices where a lot of food actually gets spoiled and we have to throw it out. So sensitivity on food supply chains, reducing transportation costs, GHG emissions, to choice of crops, etc. So quite a lot actually can begin at the individual level. And specifically, I would say that if you really become a change agent by disciplining yourself and your households, that's the good beginning, I would say.
Yeah, so I think each one of us can make a difference. And you know what you said about leaving no one behind, that's the core focus of our campaign this season. We're getting a lot of questions. Animesh Prakash is asking, how climate action can be made more participatory? It is nothing but imperative that climate mitigation efforts are led by people's movement if we are serious about avoiding a climate catastrophe. So I think it's more of a...
I completely agree with that statement, that community participation and local actions are more imperative than option, and like never before, really. And that is true for both mitigation and adaptation to climate change. So, I mean, at the community level, what actually is important is reporting the changes and challenges the communities are facing. And again, I would stress this point that it is extremely important to really, invest in the local voices, really listen to the local voices, the most vulnerable communities, bring them to the center of decision making and planning process, promote locally owned innovative solutions. There are lots of people who are actually doing quite a lot of good work. And so there is no time now to really waste on educating and all. I mean, there are lots of good solutions traditionally available. And so it's extremely important to bring these stakeholders together and now really make a change by converting it into the people's movement, as Animesh has said, and calibrate the traditional approaches that are climate responsive and encourage the local action. So that way you actually involve the entire community. The policy dialogue actually has to really be participatory, where you hear the voices from the community.
So I think key here, the points which you've said, and of course making it a people's movement, like what we say. The next question, Anu Botra wants to know, I would like to know, how does global warming impact crops when it comes to nutritional value of food and staples?
Absolutely. I think that is one important aspect, because when we are talking about this huge rates of malnutrition, and specifically when we talk about the Asia Pacific region, we really carry the highest burden of than any other region, specifically when it comes to malnutrition. And if the climate change is really, I would say, stealing out the nutrients from the food that we usually eat, then how do we really, achieve the SDG 2? So, for example, one of the reports by IPCC, it actually talks about the carbon emissions. So, if the wheat grown is at around 546 ppm CO2, it has about 6 to 13% less protein, and about 3 or 4 to 7% less zinc, and even iron, which we know that the anemia is like really very high percentages in India and even in the Asia Pacific region. So if those kinds of things are really happening, then naturally we have to think about how we are going to really sustain the nutrition in our diets going over a period of time. And one of the important aspects is really to look at the climate resilient nutritious crops. There is a lot of talk about millets, which is actually ongoing, and that is, you have the nutritious and climate resilient crop which is there. So that is where the millet is also being said as kind of crop for future. But at the same time, one important thing that is really needs to be taken into consideration is like even the fruits and vegetable production, which is we consider as key component of healthy diet, is going to be at risk. And heat stress actually reduces the fruit set, speeds up the development of the annual vegetable or losses and all that. So looking at those quality issues, increasing the food loss and waste, increased investment on the storage and all is something which is extremely important. But what is most important is to really look at the alternate cropping and research that really helps us to further understand it better and also invest in the crops which are more climate responsive and nutritious.
So I think climate response as well as nutrition. In fact, millet, there's this whole program which even the Prime Minister has been talking about. Just an interesting question that's come up. Shreya Singh wants to know, why is COP26 important and how does it affect us, the young people? Because, this time there's actually a lot of talk about the COP, it's going to be starting in a couple of days.
Absolutely. So I think the simple answer to this question is that COP26 is important to secure our current and future generations a safe and secure life for them, for our planet, because there is no option of planet B there for us. So this actually provides a great opportunity to highlight and commit to urgent actions by countries across the globe and on the issues of priorities. That is just a kind of more of a layman's perspective. But if we talk about specific goals, the COP26 actually has laid down some concrete goals for itself. And some of the issues like the 2030 targets and on the carbon emissions, so net zero target by mid-century. So these are some of the opportunities where the resolve by all the countries actually can be renewed. Then the commitments for completing those commitments and action plan actually can be drawn out. There is a target of really investing or a minimum of $100 billion on climate finance per year. So this is an opportunity where we can actually have a roadmap for that. And also, finalizing the Paris rule book, how we really implement the recommendations of that. And about the interesting part of this question was about what young people can really do. And I really like that question because, today's youth generation is, I think, the largest in the history. And the global population, if we again talk about, I think the high percentage is in fact concentrated in low and middle income countries, specifically in South and East Asia and Africa. So, in fact, today's youth generation is on the front line, and it will really cope with the effects of the climate change. Themselves as well as for their children during their lifetimes itself, and that is where it is extremely important for youth to really get engaged, participate, raise voice, and get the things done. So youth has change agents and the natural innovators. So they have a huge role to really play to be more creative, imaginative, flexible, enterprising, and really contribute and show the way in a way, or lead the way. That's what I would say.
So Shreya, that answers it really well, how the youth, you guys need to come forward, and I mean, how important it is actually for the coming generation. Pranay wants to know what role development finance architecture can play to mitigate the impact of global warming on food systems. How can various development cooperation modalities like South-South cooperation play, I mean, a role?
Yeah, I think, I mean, this is a very, very important question. And I just talked about the commitment of Paris Agreement and importance of really developing a financial architecture. And specifically, if we talk about global financial architecture, it's quite a complex issue. And it is evolving. I mean, as you know, that the way the climate change is really unfolding, this entire development finance architecture as well is really evolving over a period of time. And specifically to mitigate the global warming and its impact on food systems, I think it is an area which really needs quite a lot of attention. And I mean, whenever we really talk about the role of development finance architecture, the first important thing is that it's quite complex, and it has to really look at fund flows from different multilateral kind of sources. Some of the countries are really going ahead with establishment of the funding mechanisms. For example, India has its own adaptation fund, which are really good examples. But then how those can really be strengthened, how those could be expanded, and that is extremely important. And I mean, as he has said, I think he talked about the South-South cooperation to play a vital role, and it indeed has. I mean, because see, the climate doesn't know the country boundaries. So the change is happening all across. I mean, there could be a bit of variation. However, it doesn't really recognize those man-made boundaries. And so it's extremely important to have this modality. And I would say that for climate change and food systems and food security, South-South cooperation in the coming days would have an extremely important pivotal role. And India, again, actually can have the dual responsibility of, I mean, showing its experience and innovations to the world to learn from it, as well as the India itself really learns from others.
So clearly, Pradna, this is a really important topic. We're getting so many questions. Unfortunately, we'll be just be able to take the last two questions. Aradhana Srivastava wants to know, the connect is critical. I mean, I'm guessing she's talking about climate change and food security. Also brings to mind the questions: does global warming affect women and men differently? Who is more likely to get hungrier with global warming?
I mean, who gets more hungrier with global warming? I would say that, I mean, biologically, we all should actually be equally hungry.
Yes.
However, we do understand that women do play a pivotal role again in feeding their families and communities, as they engage in producing, processing, cooking the food, as well as, I mean, preparing the meals for the entire family, not just for them. And so the food, nutrition security, resilience to climate change in agriculture sector, this really largely depends on women. And climate change, in fact, impacts, I mean, among the diverse social groups, depending on age, ethnicity, gender, caste, in our case, wealth, and the class. So climate change, it definitely has immediate and long-term impacts on livelihoods of poor and vulnerable communities. And they actually are contributing to greater risk of food insecurity that can be a stress multiplier for, I mean, and the stress multiplier actually means that, I mean, it will give rise to the migration, which could be internal and external. So it is extremely important to understand the role of women, because if they are migrating, they still face drudgery. If they are not migrating, they are staying back, then they have the entire burden of really running the family. And so when we talk about these impacts of climate change, this definitely has impact on the food security of specifically women. And we also know that there are those intra-household food insecurity issues, which are already there. So there are underlying causes which are already there, and then the climate in fact acts as a risk multiplier. And so it's extremely important to really empower women in the rights-based approaches, decision making, creating synergies among household food security, adaptation and mitigation, and defining the role of women in all these actions right from the beginning.
Okay, so the last question, I think you've explained all those really well. Clearly, a lot of people want to know on this topic. So Shamlina Alima wants to know, how are food systems from farm to plate contributing to climate crisis?
Okay, so this in fact, it will actually talk about, I mean, I'll just quickly answer this talking about the three or four important parts of the food system. So if we talk about the production, the first and foremost is, as I said, that the production is impacted by increase in temperature and all, which actually gives rise to heat and water stress. There could be increased infestation of pests. There could be diseases. We see that due to increase in the temperature and the climate change, all of a sudden, in last few years, the vector-borne diseases have gone up, chikungunya and all that. So but that actually impacts the production, and as I said, that the yields, the total quantities, and also the nutritional value. If we talk about the second part of the food system, which is storage, then again, because there could be a variation in the humidity, that actually would impact the pathogen, mycotoxins. Cold storage needs are increased. As I said, that the temperature variation and all that would really, and that actually can really give rise to the food wastage. If we talk about the third stage, which is maybe the marketing and the retail and all, so there is an impact on the food prices. And unfortunately, till now, I did not talk about it, but there is a very high likelihood that the prices of the food really go up. If the prices of the food go up, naturally the availability and accessibility, economic accessibility of the poor will be reduced, and that again has a huge impact on the food and nutrition security. And the last one I would say is, at this point in time, for the sake of simplicity, I am mindful of the large expanse of the food system. But if we talk about consumption and utilization, the consumption, intestinal nutritional absorption, that actually goes down, and the nutritional needs will really go up. But at the same time, what is really important is to look at how this food system can be transformed to make it sustainable and adaptable and responsive to climate change. For example, when the farmer produces the food, if we talk about, let's say, a millet, the millet can be consumed locally. Or if it is a production of wheat, the wheat can be consumed locally. But usually what happens is the wheat from place A goes to place B. And then during that time, it actually utilizes the storages, it utilizes the entire the transportation, and then and that all contributes to the greenhouse gas emissions. So it's very important to look at in the entire value chain or entire food system, what are those critical elements where we can really optimize and reduce the impact on the environment, as well as also see. And that's where also, there was a question on the local localization. So that localization, decentralization, all those things actually will need to be looked at, I would say, de novo.
Thank you so much, for sharing all this with us. You've answered a lot of questions which our viewers, and that also shows that, people understand we really need to start working towards the whole climate change. And with COP26 coming, I think we all need to, and especially the connection. I think this connect which we're talking about, this is key. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
That's it on the Banega Swasth India podcast this week. If you have comments, queries, or suggestions on the topic we discussed today, or issues you would like us to cover in future, write to us on bsipodcast@ndtv.com. Remember, BSI stands for Banega Swasth India. You can also connect with us on Banega Swasth India handles on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and continue the conversation through the week. Till next week, this is Ambika Singh Kama signing off. Stay healthy, stay safe.